Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us here today, where we're going to be talking about demand gen versus lead gen. Lead gen? Lead gen. What do you really want? I'm Rob, I'm MD here at Finally, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Chris, who heads up content.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here.
I guess we should probably just tackle the obvious question. Like, what do you think is the difference between demand gen and lead gen?
So for me, I think the fundamental difference between demand gen and lead gen is ultimately the objective, right? Mm-hmm. If you think about a lead generating campaign, most of the time it has a bit of a expiry, right? It's kind of designed to achieve a certain thing in a certain time frame. That might be a new product's coming out and that product will eventually be launched, or a webinar and you want people to attend and that webinar date will eventually happen.
Yeah.
Demand gen is much more always on. It's much more about putting your brand in the epicenter of somebody's mind and feeding them that brand and that message as a much more repetitive, ongoing thing. And I think when you look at them objectively, one is obviously designed to generate leads. Mm-hmm. You want some kind of a sale, an inquiry, something on the outcome. Whilst the demand gen is much more focused around how can you attract someone and retain their attention? How can you generate that awareness? How can you put those eyes on your business and your brand? And how can you potentially do that for a long time?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we'll talk in internally and with clients of brand awareness. You know, demand generation, demand gen campaigns, is it just a fancy word for that? Is there a difference? I mean, arguably for me, the definition, very much like you said, lead generation is the kind of end goal of most campaigns. You know, you're running a campaign to, as you say, launch a product, invite someone to an event, a webinar, whatever that is. And in order to do that, you want people to take an action, thus creating a lead. Whereas businesses still need to just market. Now, for me, you can't have lead generation if you haven't already done some kind of brand awareness and demand generation.
Completely agree.
Because otherwise you're going to a cold audience and saying, join our webinar, and they have no idea why or who you are, or if you're a legit company. You know, there's more and more scams going on, and people are a bit more savvy now as to, you know, not just clicking an ad, not just clicking something that they've been sent without doing some research. So I think the kind of mindset has to shift and say, in order to run lead gen campaigns at any period in our marketing cycle, we actually have to create brand awareness and demand.
Completely.
And we want to be doing that all the time. You know, that's the practice of marketing, right? That's why you'll hear me often wang on about why do McDonald's still advertise? Because they're still creating a demand for their products at any given time. Yeah. You know, I'm feeling a bit peckish. I look up, there's a huge pointing sign saying McDonald's 150 metres to your left. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll go and get a burger.
Yeah, that's a great example as well, because quite often people will look at advertising from those big companies. They'll look at a McDonald's, they'll look at an Apple. And these businesses, they're not advertising to make sales. Sales is a byproduct of what they do, and naturally from advertising, they will generate revenue from sales. It's inevitable. Yeah. But as you said, it's maintaining that kind of market position. It's reiterating that brand so it stays a front of somebody's mind. If McDonald's stopped advertising, they wouldn't lose a load of money. They would still make a ton of money. But what they would do is they would start generating questions in people is there something wrong with McDonald's? Why aren't they advertising? What's gone on that's stopping them from doing it? It's that kind of position, as you said, you see the golden arches, you go, oh, I could smash a cheeseburger. Yeah. You don't have to almost be persuaded to buy, whilst I think sometimes with lead gen, it's very clear that you are, as you said, trying to create an action, and that action is coming through some kind of persuasion to do something, right? So through messaging, through an asset, through an offer, whatever it is, you're trying to persuade someone to do something that you would like them to do. And I think when you said about kind of brand awareness as well, it's so important to have that kind of persistent brand identity and story out there, that so it starts to become almost kind of woven into communication as well.
It's the unwritten side, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, in that example there of McDonald's, they just need to create an awareness in your mind that you're hungry, almost. They don't need to sell McDonald's in that ad because we know what McDonald's do and what they sell. bang average food that you're going to regret half an hour later. But there's no need. Whereas I guess if we take a step back to kind of the market we work in and sort of smaller business, because everyone go, okay, yeah, everyone knows who McDonald's are. But they didn't, right? They've had 20, 30, 40, 50 years of history of building that brand, but they do it consistently. And I think where we kind of struggle with, talking to clients is that they're not McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
So they have to start to create some brand awareness and understand that does cost money and takes time, because you can't just go out and kind of like go expect people to buy your product.
Yeah.
Like some of the fastest growing brands in the world that have come from nowhere, they've still created a buzz. They didn't just get leads, they created a hype, or, they've created some amazing ads, like an Uber of this world.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually was walking through King's Cross Station yesterday, and Uber obviously got some new service where you can book trains now, right? Now I've seen the ads, I've walked through it, I have an awareness of that. I haven't done anything with it other than mention it now and want to look into it, but I know who Uber are because Uber have done the hard work. So now it's okay, now I can book trains. So I'm thinking in my head, why? Like, what is there a benefit to booking a train through Uber? There's a message which I think I caught, which is around some sort of cashback or discounts. I think if I book a train through Uber, I might get like a credit towards a Uber taxi or something, right?
Yeah,
so there's obviously an offer. So, that's worked, right? I've walked through, I've seen that once on the return, and now I'm thinking I'll go and check that out.
And you've reiterated it to somebody else.
Yeah, and so they've done that to create a buzz around that new thing. Like, has that generated them a lead? Not yet. Like, will I go and look? Maybe. But they've created an awareness of something that I was unaware of yesterday.
Yeah.
And that is the purpose for me of creating brand awareness campaigns. And when you're a smaller business, people don't know you. So you can say, okay, we can throw some money at some paid ads. And yes, we can. And most agencies, most marketing companies can create a paid advertising campaign that will likely, get some results. But it's about identifying, like, are they actually good quality leads? And I think that's a whole nother conversation around what is a lead, right?
Yeah.
Because someone filling out a form, are they a lead? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, by the definition of that campaign, the goal was we will generate leads by people completing a form.
Someone to fill the form out.
And they did, so they're a lead. So, yeah, I guess the difference is also thinking about the kind of leads that you're trying to generate. And when we talk to clients, I have quite regular conversations where I say, okay, what are you trying to achieve? And say, well, we just want people to be aware of us in a certain sector, or, we're not known. You're like, okay, cool. So you want to create brand awareness, makes sense. Like, we can do some demand gen. So maybe that's about us looking to drive traffic to your website or to your landing page, or, some information that's got no kind of thinking around making them take an action. This is purely, we're just going to do it. And then I say, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Okay, cool. So, and then just to be clear, what is your KPIs? Like, your senior leaders, what are they asking you to do? I'll generate leads. Cool. So none of what we just spoke about. They're like, well, yeah. I'm like, no, because they don't go hand in hand. So I think when we do work with clients, that is definitely what we try and instill. I think Seco's a great example, which is a campaign that you work quite heavily on. We were asked to help them launch a new product. Now, the brand Seco is obviously well known in the industry, but this was a brand new product.
Yeah.
So, arguably you could have gone and tried to go to an existing audience that did know them with a lead gen campaign. But what we were asked to do was, create a noise, a buzz, an awareness of this new product to the market.
Yeah.
So what was your thinking behind that, and what was our strategy, I guess?
So one of the things that was really interesting about that campaign, that was the Seco X-Heads campaign, is that, yes, it was a new product for Seco, but the actual product itself wasn't new. So like, other companies were making something very similar in terms of its like design and functionality. So you're right, trying to just say, hey, buy this tool, like, it's just not, it's not compelling enough.
No.
There's not enough justification, and there's not enough, I guess reasoning to make someone connect with that product enough to want to buy it. So yes, we took a demand gen approach to the strategy. It was around creating a story. The product itself, X-Heads, means exchangeable heads. Essentially, you can take the drill bit off the top of the tool and you can change it for different functionality. The benefit of that is obviously reduction in downtime, not having to change tools. It's improved tool life because you're just changing the head, so you know the durability of that product. Yeah. But we had this idea of kind of how could we essentially play on this idea of smart, and obviously smart feeds very much into manufacturing and engineering. People are always trying to find like smarter solutions to do things that save them time, money, resource, material, whatever. Yeah. So we kind of took the mantra of playing on smart isn't actually all that good. It's not what it's cracked up to be. And we had this visualizer that basically had a surgeon's body with an astronaut's head, two very contrasting fields, but feed very nicely into the sector, being like medical as one and kind of aerospace being another. Space travel is a big part of aerospace. And naturally, those two disciplines are incredibly regimented, right? They need that kind of like precision. They are highly regulated. There's lots of kind of exacting qualities that go into serving those two sectors. So kind of by creating that persona, so to speak, of the astronaut with the surgeon, it connected those two sectors together, but it demonstrated how one type of tool fits in with another type of tool to make a complete new solution. Yeah. And yeah, it generated like nearly, I think, 2 million impressions and people watching that video on YouTube. It was the most viewed video that Seco had put for a new product. And Seco, like many companies, have always relied on, we have a new product.
Yeah.
It's great. It's fine. But sometimes you have to take that tact of thinking, okay, what is my benchmark for success with this? Yes, like you mentioned with Uber, you haven't gone and booked a train with Uber just yet, but you've seen that ad, it's captured at least a degree of your attention, enough for you to share it, which means I'm now informed, I probably will look at it. Yeah. And the sale is not necessarily the immediate thing, but it's a byproduct of that awareness. It's a byproduct of becoming aware of what that service is. And that's what we did for X-Heads. And it was also, from a creative standpoint, it was really enjoyable to work on because a lot of demand gen advertising has a lot more creative steer around it and gives you much more creative flexibility.
Because you're not asking for an action, are you? We're
right.
Not like saying, do this.
Exactly. And quite often you'll have clients or people, if you spend some time on LinkedIn, people will share marketing campaigns or marketing things that they think, oh, this is fantastic, what a great idea. Yeah. 9 times out of 10, they are some kind of demand gen advertising. They are some kind of out of home or faux out of home thing. They're normally quite humorous or they don't feel particularly corporate. And a lot of the time, which is where it's a difficulty with our sector, is the potential purchase or commitment of the customer is really low value. Mm-hmm. Uber, it costs you like 20 quid, right? Surreal, I'm sure you've seen their ads for the cereal brand. They say like Michael Jordan endorsed this and it's like some guy who's in Slough or whatever. Or like they've got clip art advertising. A box of Surreal is like £3 in Sainsbury's. So like, yeah, someone will naturally see that ad and go and buy it. Whilst in our sector, when you have clients and companies who have very long lead times, they have big sales pipelines, you're talking into the hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions for a purchase. Buy my thing, it just doesn't work. Like, no. You need to nurture people and you need to bring them on that kind of journey, and that is where demand gen is very strong for that.
Yeah, and I think exactly to that, the sales cycle are longer, product value is higher, and also you might not know that you need that product or service right then. Sure. Okay, marketing is about right time, right place. Yeah. And I think, again, many people forget that go back to the McDonald's example, they are advertising consistently because they don't know when someone's going to be hungry and they don't know when someone's going to pass that particular out-of-home ad, that bus stop or whatever. Whereas I think if you're a little bit too narrow-minded and think, you know, we have this budget and we want to generate as many leads as possible, the right leads might not be looking for your product or service at that moment. Yeah. You know, and so actually taking that budget and putting it into a longer running, like brand awareness or demand generation style campaign might get you better results in the long term because you can follow those up. Okay, we're not saying brand awareness and demand gen campaigns will create no leads. What we're trying to say is that you need to create an awareness of a brand of demand in order to generate leads. So they might well go to your landing page, look at your site and find another form that you've got running, which is a lead gen form. It wasn't just the direct result of that ad or that campaign. Yeah. You know, so that still will generate leads. But what we're trying to do is put your name, your brand, your product, your service kind of in the back of their mind, like we're saying with Uber, like we have not done anything with that yet, but I'm likely to go and look because I'm now intrigued.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do, create a demand.
Yeah, and that's really interesting you say that, because to come back to Seco, something that's really interesting about them as a client, which I suspect probably is a relative thing for other tool suppliers, is that a lot of their customers are tied into 5-year contracts.
Right.
So they have a tool supplier that they will work with for 5 years. So the chances are that someone being ready to commit to using Seco tools right now is relatively slim.
Minimal,
It's possible that they've just signed a contract with another person for half a decade.
Yeah.
But Seco still want to win that business, right? So they have to keep positioning themselves as that authority and those people that you can trust, and doing that repeatedly. So when that person is ready, they've seen so much Seco that it kind of seems foolish for them to not choose Seco.
At least get them in the, invite
Get them
to
in the
table.
door, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And something that I think is really interesting about kind of demand gen advertising, particularly when we talk about brand awareness and that kind of, let's say, kind of always on story, McDonald's being a fabulous example. I think another one who's really interesting is someone like Specsavers. Like if you think of Specsavers as a business, what they do is kind of boring. Like they're an optician. You go there to get your eyes and ears tested, and you come away with a pair of glasses. Like what they do is not that interesting. But their whole brand positioning is obviously around should have gone to Specsavers, right? They don't create a new campaign when they've got a new product. They might say we've got 2-for-1 glasses this month or whatever, but their messaging and their advertising and however that's distributed, whether that's in stores, online, on TV, out of home, whatever, is all built around should have gone to Specsavers.
Yeah.
And they just lay into that story repeatedly and find different ways to iterate that story to the point where now, when I need to get my eyes tested, I could go to Vision Express, but I'm probably going to go to Specsavers. And
Can you name? I mean, that's interesting because my wife actually uses Vision Express, and I've always wondered why. I think it was just historical.
Yeah.
I go to Specsavers. But can you actually, off the top of your head, can you tell us what is Vision Express's, what is their position?
The only thing I know about Vision Express is they have that ad with the mole on it, who's like, oh, these are quite nice. But that aside, nothing.
Exactly.
What
So
they
none of
want-
us can name that, right? And we're in this world, whereas should have gone to Specsavers is synonymous.
Yeah, and people will say it, right?
Yeah.
If someone does something foolish and they trip
Yeah.
up, it should have gone to Specsavers.
Yeah.
When you go on the internet and you're looking for something, you don't go, I'm going to search for this online. You go, like, I'm going to Google it, or I'll TikTok it, or whatever. It's that. It's where the persistence of that brand becomes like woven into the communication.
Yeah, and then you've got a Pepsi situation where you've got to, play on the fact that, is Pepsi okay?
Yeah.
One of the best ads ever, that is.
Yeah.
I mean, Specsavers actually, funny enough, I've seen, I don't know if it's real, I'm assuming it's not real, but there's an ad or a thing been going around in the last week where a Specsavers van, if it is impaled on one of the parking pillars like we've got at the bottom of the high street.
Yeah.
And the classic, they don't need to say
Exactly.
should have gone to Specsavers. We all look at that and we're all going should have gone to Specsavers.
Immediately get it.
Yeah.
And that's I think they are a really interesting example of how a company who what they sell and what they do isn't massively fashionable. Yeah, sure, you can get designer glasses, lovely.
Yeah.
But the service that they predominantly provide as being that kind of optician and your high street, optical solution, they could easily have just gone down the straight and narrow and been like, we sell glasses, we make your eyesight better, lovely, lovely, lovely. That's probably what Vision Express do for the most part. And it's very possible that Vision Express's quality service might be better than Specsavers, but Specsavers' brand position and that kind of how they've persistently created that demand and maintained that narrative of should have gone to Specsavers makes it difficult for you to not go there.
Yeah. And that's, again, the whole point is there is a constant demand that they are generating and they're in the conversation. And if they ran a lead gen campaign, a 2-for-1 glasses offer, they're likely going to generate way more leads because people are aware of it.
Exactly.
They're like, oh yeah, I do need to get my eyes tested. Yeah, good brand. That is now an offer that's talking to me in the here and now.
Yeah.
I'll take them up on that offer. Leads are generated. But it's because they've done the hard work year round to constantly be creating demand.
Yeah, it's the foundation, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's that foundational approach of making sure that people see your brand and they see your business, and they, even if they're not ready to buy or choose it, there's some kind of forged connection with it. And to use Seco, if they've got a market to potential customers for 5 years, the hope would be that once that 5-year period comes up and they're ready to look for another tooling supplier, Seco have done enough legwork to generate trust in what they do and who they are to make them, as you said, at least get them to the table of the conversation.
So for anyone that's watching, kind of listening, going, yeah, I get it. Like these guys sound like they know what they're talking about, but I've still got bosses that want leads. What can we? How can we help them arm them for those conversations? Because ultimately, those bosses, those decision makers that want the leads, they're still humans. They're still part of it. And if they listen to this conversation, or actually you talked about like how the concept works, they'll go, oh yeah, I totally get it. But they still want leads, you know, because someone along the line, a sales team need to be kept hungry, or sales aren't as good as they like and they want leads. So how do we kind of help them to think about the difference? And I guess for me, you'll create a more effective, better value lead generation campaign if you do the demand gen, brand awareness work ahead of that. And I think if you're kind of a smaller company, or you're new to the market or marketing and you've never done marketing before, that sounds super scary. I mean, we as a business, we invest reasonably heavily into everything that we do. You know, we practice what we preach. We're creating content right here. And this is all part about creating demand. Like we're not asking anyone to buy our products or services. We're just hopefully showing that we know what we're talking about, so that if they are ready, they might give us a conversation. They might give us a chance to talk to them. But I've come full circle around. My question is really, how do you think that people can try and have those conversations? What are the kind of key points that they should be talking about?
I think fundamentally, there's always going to be a challenge, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to adjust behavior. So if you have a sales directing team who are like, we need to make X amount from marketing, go do that with the budget we give you. You already have an objective before you've even started thinking about what campaigns and things you might even want to do. You know that you're supposed to be hitting a certain threshold in order to kind of justify you being there, really.
But most of those are fictitious numbers.
Right. They're just kind of
out of the sky.
So that immediately you are slightly on the back foot. I think in terms of actually like theoretically pitching demand gen, which seems kind of sad and mad that we have to do that, but theoretically we do. It's maybe looking at kind of what metrics for success, what do they think is a metric for success, and how can you challenge that perception of that? So if we go back to the Seco thing, that X-Heads video generated 2 million impressions. It's the highest number of impressions they've ever got. If you don't know what an impression is, it's essentially it being displayed to someone, so it appears in their feed, or it appears on their YouTube page, or in an ad, or whatever. They are presented with that material. I think looking at that, sure, someone's going to look at that number and go, well, 2 million, that's a lot. Because the number has weight, right? People trust numbers more than they trust words. It's just fact. So that number has heft. If you can then go, okay, the start of this was we wanted to generate that awareness about this product, which by doing that and investing in the resource, it generated this number of impressions. We then can start thinking about, okay, how can you then funnel that into the next stage? So how do we take that initial interest and start moving that into a more traditional marketing campaign, a more traditional lead generating campaign that maybe has paid advertising, it maybe has email nurturing, it maybe has some kind of webinar or sign-up event at the end, and you start to kind of nurture those people through. I think a lot of it is actually when you go in to actually use some of those examples as well, right? So that to think about, make people think about other businesses. So, we've spoken about McDonald's, we've spoken about Uber, we've spoken about Apple, we've spoken about Specsavers. There is such a breadth of business across all sectors, not just the sector that we serve in manufacturing and engineering, who do this. And there are so many businesses as well who are of, significant success and significant wealth. Like, I think we could be relatively confident that Apple could stop advertising tomorrow and they would still be on the S&P 500 in a year's time. They're not going to fall off the face of the earth.
But I would argue their sales would drop.
They definitely would drop. They definitely would drop. So, but they do it as that kind of maintaining that market position to affirm themselves as that kind of, they are the authority, they are the technology company that you choose. And they invest hundreds and hundreds of millions in just letting people know that Apple exists. And I think if a big company does that, and a company with such a significant amount of dominance in the industry does that, smaller businesses have to look and go, okay, well, everybody knows Apple, and they still do it all the time. No one really knows about me. How do I get them to know me in order to trust me to potentially buy from me?
Yeah, which is great conversation start, because if you think about that, there's a market, right? There's 100 people that need this product or service. Now, there'll be a market leader normally in that product or service. So in mobile phones, arguably Apple are the current market leaders. They have the largest market share. So Samsung have to be careful that they don't create, or they need to, what they're trying to do is attack Apple's market share.
Yeah.
Right? So they have to kind of go, we need to take a customer or tell a compelling story as to why you should switch from Apple to Samsung. What they don't want to do is just create an additional demand too much that then Apple will get because they're the market leaders.
Yeah.
So, it's also about understanding that kind of nuance of marketing. Is like, okay, we talked heavily about demand generation, perfect, but also sometimes demand generation is what you don't want to create, ironically, if you don't have that awareness or the kind of compelling argument is for a switch, because all you'll do is create demand for your competitor.
Yeah.
And so, there's kind of caveats to it, but again, it's identifying, thinking about the objectives, and I think not many companies go to the level of understanding of what like fundamentally, what are we trying to achieve? Every business is trying to achieve sales revenue typically, or else I don't know why they're in business. So we're trying to understand, we would like some new customers, but you can also market to your existing customers.
Yep.
Because if you've got some existing customers that you can upsell, they're the easiest people to sell to. It's going to be the cheapest way of doing it, but you still have to create a demand again amongst your own clientele for your products, for your additional products. And people just forget that as well.
Yeah, and that's so important, because obviously they're already theoretically bought into you as a business. But if you think about general advertising, especially in this kind of digital age, in the age of the internet, people see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ads every day.
Yeah, I think there's some horrible stats on that.
It's unbelievable, right? Yeah. They're so oversaturated with the information they see all the time that, they might have already signed up to you. They might have, I don't know, if you're a B2C, they might have registered for their 10% off your first order, and they get your emails for the next 15 years or whatever. But chances are, even though they're already a customer, they might have actually kind of forgotten that they're your customer. You might have slipped out of their focal point because you haven't been reiterating your brand position to them. So it's kind of like every customer is valid, right? And you make a very sage point. We always go after new customers because new customers are shiny. New customers are like, we managed to convert X number of new people who weren't interested in us now. But you might have loads of people sat there in your kind of email lists who are not dormant, but they're already to a degree warmed to who you are. So
you down the cycle.
Yeah, you got to pay them as much attention, if not really more, because they're there and they're ready. They don't need as much convincing as someone who is brand new, especially if you're a business that is maybe, as I say, a smaller business who doesn't have as much influence and is not as known. Chances are the ones who already know you, they know you reasonably well. You'd like to think. It's a very, very good point.
So I guess kind of to sum up and kind of wrap up on this, it's about realigning your thinking and maybe the KPI metrics, and because otherwise as an agency, people ask, we can be like, well, okay, you're basically trying to cop out here and say, we're not going to generate leads, but we're going to take your money. And I think that is not what we're trying to do. But we're trying to help and kind of look at what are those metrics. So I think from a demand generation point of view, what we would be looking to do is generate views to websites. If it's increased footfall into physical locations that can be measured, and whereas a lead campaign is going to drive a marketing or sales lead, and again, there's quite a big difference between them, which we could say for a whole nother conversation, because I think that deserves a conversation. Again, there's a big misalignment on a marketing lead and a sales lead. Someone that is sales ready, in my opinion, it's going to be very unlikely that a sales ready lead is going to be generated from a single campaign, unless unless they're an existing customer or have an awareness of the brand, right? I need jeans. I see an ad for Replay. I know the brand. I trust the brand. I have a desire right now for some jeans. Great. It might make me buy. So that would work. But other than that, if it's, I'm not in the market for jeans right now, they're creating a demand in my mind about their brand.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully you found that really useful. If you've got any questions, then reach out to myself or Chris on LinkedIn. We'd love to talk about this. We could talk about this for a lot longer. And I think there's some amazing examples of this in the actual world, particularly, in kind of the more consumer-led brands that you'll be aware of. But certainly in this sector, there's some real great scope to create amazing campaigns, create some great brand awareness, tell some compelling stories.
Definitely.
Which will fundamentally generate leads in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks very much for joining me, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, hope you've enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone. If you enjoyed this masterclass, we also have 2 further, one on marketing budget and one on marketing automation. You'll find the links for them in the description down below.